Aloha and welcome to the Unrulr Podcast, where we talk with educators, learners, and people that are just excited to share out what they're doing in schools and learning communities. This week, I'm joined by Phu Tranchi, who is the Director of Community and Engagement, as well as Experiential Learning at Oakwood School in Hollywood, California. Phu is a mover of mountains in the world of experiential education, and is a truth speaker at the same time. I love Phu's understanding of learner agency and what it takes to allow a community to truly be equitable and engage with their learners. Phu Tranchi, welcome to Unrulr's podcast. Phu, I'm really interested in the work that you're doing at Oakwood and how it can be kind of scaled in different parts of the country and the world. Can you first kind of share with our listeners what you're embarking on and what you're kind of excited to grow?
Yeah, in my role with experiential learning, when I first kind of stepped into my role, there were many hats, and I spent a lot of time changing hats. And what I realized is that I was failing to capitalize upon this beautiful umbrella that I exist under called experiential learning, which encapsulates everything. Furthermore, I've been making this joke all along that my inherent goal is to actually put myself out of a job because I believe all learning should exist in this manner. That students should be connected to the world around them. You mentioned it before. I'm all about student agency and their capacity for creating change. I mean, Jesus, I could not be more thrilled than this recent Held versus Montana decision. I think it paves the way for so much exciting change and progress, obviously specifically within climate change, but certainly in youth activism. And that's really what I'm all about is how do we center youth and give them the opportunity to make the change. I'm not one of these people who says I really detest the notion that we're preparing for students that jobs that don't yet exist, because I have zero capacity to do anything like that. I don't know what those jobs are, so how can I prepare any kids for them? But what we can do is prepare them to shape what that future is going to look like, and therefore how they're going to leverage these unknown, this uncharted territory, AI, which is advancing so quickly. We see this. I've heard it put as this, kind of telescoping nature of evolution, how things go so much faster every generation. And so for me, it's just, what is our adaptability to that? How are we empowering our students? Because we keep making more and more of a mess, literally and figuratively. We see it all around us, even just today in the last few days, the past week. And so, what are we doing to ensure that our students have the capacity to impact what their future is going to look like, nonetheless ours?
I mean, building off of that, so much of my work in experiential education, whatever we call it, deeper learning, youth-led work, is knowing when to get the fuck out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think forgive the F word, but it's really important to not overstructure these experiences, to have deliverables and milestones, but to allow our learners to kind of have the time to work and get their ideas out in the world. How do you, as an ex-ed leader, do that? How do you build a program, but also allow time for agency in that space?
Yeah. What I enjoy is, and again, it's separate, and I don't want it to be separate. I want it to be the norm of what we're doing. But I run this 2-week experiential program. And what I enjoy within that
during the school year.
During the school year, yeah. We pause the regular school term, and then teachers develop these 2-week mini courses that they run with students. And what we enjoy with that is a complete mindset shift. And everyone, especially I see it, my favorite part is, and this is key to experiential education and being able to get the F out of the way, is to allow space for risk taking, allow space for failure. Allow space for experimentation, true experimentation. I don't know why we're so averse to that in the normal year, why the stakes have to be so high. The stakes are already high no matter what in education. So I don't understand, obviously, it comes back to this default institutionalized, grading systems, preparing for college. We know that that is the reason for the curriculum, right? The Committee of 10. We're setting up the rules for how we can get our kids into college way back in the 1800s. And we're still following that template. So it's for me a key of that structure, and how do we then broaden that? That's really what I'm going after. How do we get teachers and students to maintain that mindset? It drives me crazy, and it's an unfortunate part of it is that they flip the switch back again after they've come back after that 2 weeks.
Totally.
There's this beautiful learning. There's this and learning, pure learning, where we're talking about learners, and that's something I'm always talking about as well. Is blurring that line between teacher and student. When we're all learners, we're all moving forward, and that's, to me, the richest that we have within schooling and within education. It's like when everybody is embracing that we are all learners doing it together, and that's part of getting out of the way and allowing students to really guide what it is that we're going to look at and what we're going to explore.
I love that. I mean, I think, of course, when you say blurring the line between teacher and student, there's still that important power balance that's there as an educator, right? To create a safe space. But what I take from your statement is a teacher becomes a part of the learning community. They're part of a collective, right? Just like musicians are a part of a collective. And like, as I think about my work with you and my work with Kelly Fast and our work together, it's having that culture within a classroom where we're embarking on a challenge, not just me as a teacher and you as a student, but us as learners. And I think like it's been cool to learn from you on how you create an atmosphere where students are the best teachers of other students, where they're learning from each other too. How do you do that? Like, how do you do that in your space, and how do we as teachers do that more?
I think it just comes down to humility. Especially when we're talking about power dynamics, if you come in needing to be the authority, needing to know it all, that the kids are going to sense that right away. But if you have an authenticity to say, "Hey, I'm here to learn. Let's explore this together. Let's figure this out. I'm not quite sure." That's a great question. Let's dig deeper into that. When we go into that space and say, we need to do this together. And you're welcoming the students, inviting the students to join you on this exploration, then I think we set a different tone for learning. And again, it's an opportunity that I have within this program, but it's always something that I try to share in myself. Coming up as a teacher is just, what can we do? What are the realms of possibilities? And I'm always known. I'm always throwing out the word audacious. I love audacious ideas. I love ideas. I love it when someone comes up to me with an idea and they hesitate, right? They're like, well, totally. I don't know about this. 100%. I'm like, let's go. This I want to hear. Let's go.
No, I love that. You had a chance with Kelly Fast to kind of lead some sessions at the Summer ICENE conference. Can you talk about the theme of it and without going into all of the details, what you and Kelly shared and what resonated with that audience of experiential educators?
Yeah, we ran we led a cohort for what was called advanced practitioners for immersives and intensives. So basically, guiding a group of colleagues through this process of creating a program similar to the one that I've been describing that I run here at Oakwood called Immersion. Kelly also runs a similar program, ran a similar program at his previous school called Deep Dives at Notre Dame de Sion. And, what we have found in collaborating and working together is there are some really powerful lenses that you can apply to allow a framework and a structure in which teachers are going to push a little bit further beyond what they're going to do. And it really has to do primarily, number one, with mission alignment, but really what we try to do is center the teachers as the key to the entire process. That was one of our themes. The teachers are actually the most important people in the school. And we're constantly programmed to say, well, no, of course it's the kids. The kids are the most important. But the reality is it's Hal Hannaford, who's the longtime head at Sylvan House in Canada, has said, that the quality of education cannot exceed the quality of the teachers. And that's something that we really centered within our process. And, just constantly asking, where are teachers in the process? How are teachers building into this? And for me, that's a part of this culture, again, going back to that culture and ethos of learning within the institution where everybody is building together. We're not giving directives. We're not saying this is what we need to do, but we're trying to create parameters that will allow an engagement in a different type of learning that is more experimental, that has that layer of taking some risks and perhaps some audacity within that, and really trying to find ways in which we can more holistically reach what our various schools' missions are. In the end, they tend to align pretty similarly. What we're trying to do, we're trying to create good people who are going to be good citizens and contribute to society. But what does that look like from institution to institution? Well, that's going to be slightly different. And the better we align our practices towards that, and using at this point using XEd to kind of round out the things that we don't do during the regular year, that's really the power that we see within that. And that was something that I think resonated within the group, and is something that we'll continue to espouse.
When people came up to you after the session or workshop, what were they still grappling with, or what, not necessarily problems had you and Kelly solved for them, but like what new knowledge could they take back into their institutions?
I think really key is being able to push leadership in the school to say, this is okay. You're for the most part, these schools are offering this because they're being asked. They're being told, this is what we're going to do. This looks great. This is a sexy new program that we can add. We're going to blow it up all over our website, all over our marketing materials. That's kind of like the low hanging fruit end of it. But the reality is, what we were saying is, leverage that. Let's take advantage of that. And let's really use that in order to push what learning is going to look like, and how to bring in more partners who are going to commit to this way, not just for those 2 weeks, not just for that period of time, but as an outlook in education in general. How do we shift that mindset? How do we get people geared up towards doing this work continuously? And then, really key to that is engaging the students very directly, centering students and teachers in the process, and empowering them to, again, take that, apply their agency into learning, so that they are looking at what's going on in the world and responding and learning how to address it, and, perhaps how to take the government to test.
I mean,
like
I think
those kids in Montana.
Yes. I mean, I think it's a great example. Or kind of post shootings in Florida, youth coming to the table and saying, we're going to lead these movements. So somewhat, one of the things I really, and I don't think this is too much of a controversial statement, like one of the things I despise in independent schools and schools of privilege is when they have these great programs, but they're simply schools within schools. They're just right. The space where you don't do grading and you actually get to kind of connect your love of learning. And Jack and I were talking to Kwaku Anning and Mike Yates in a couple podcasts ago. And Kwaku said, that's not only detrimental, it's dangerous to a learner, because you're giving them agency and then you're quickly taking them away.
Yeah.
You're taking that agency away at the end of 2 weeks. And it's confusing. Like, I've worked with students where they're like, why are you doing this to me? Like, I love this, but in 10 minutes, I have to go to an experience where I have zero agency. Right. And I firmly believe that independent schools should not exist unless they're doing innovative, pedagogy and reaching students in a way that can be a laboratory space for, schools across the country that don't have privilege and access like they do. And I know this gets you upset too. How do we make XEd not XEd and just ed? That's a quote from you. Like, how do we extend the 2 weeks? Right. I think a lot of us in this field are grappling with that, so that it's not just a one-off and then kids have to go back to the reality of quote unquote school.
Right. Part of it is how we're putting it out there. That's literally a shift that I was just sharing last week. I don't want things to be thought of in terms of our program, again, called immersion. So I don't want people talking about immersion anymore. And I've been trying to put that message out there. I want to be talking about experiential learning, because experiential learning is not limited to immersion. If we talk about immersion, totally. We're limiting it to that silo. And that, yeah, absolutely. That you struck a nerve with that one. It drives me crazy. And I think it's really, what I try to center when talking to teachers about it is the feedback from the students. And what they're observing themselves anecdotally. Like, we all love this type of learning. We can see the engagement. We can see the difference in how students are going about and learning. And it's just constantly for me questioning, well, why do you have to revert back to the other way? Why can't you figure out, instead of just snapping back into what the system tells you to do, why can't you be more proactive in shifting and begging the system to change? Because it's clear that, especially in an independent school, we have that flexibility. And so why aren't we taking advantage of that in order to shift what it is that we say is important, what we prioritize? We're constantly talking about these things, but then we revert back to the system of A's, B's, C's, and D's, and it just doesn't make any sense. So what are we doing to demonstrate these values? And I think it's really key to continue to connect back with the students. You can see it in them. The more we draw from the students, the more we center their reflections, and the more reflective we are in our own practice. I think that we'll continue to move in that direction. But again, it is an uphill battle. I've been digging back into Dewey lately, and obviously we're talking about 200 years ago almost, right? And so we're still having the same challenges, but I think that just speaks to his prescience and his understanding. And I think it's certainly, as an experiential educator, it's everything. I go back to that all the time, right? We don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience, and that has to include the teacher. And I think that's another thing that I've been trying to put out there and having people investigate is, we have these mission statements and we gear them towards our students, but the ideal is that these are community. It's a community mission that we want this of each other as a community of learners, as opposed to what our students will do.
Phu, what's your philosophy of education?
There's one simple question that resonates with me deeply, and there's a piece written by Stephen Wolk years ago. It's just simply titled, what school could be. What's the point of school, right? And that's always driving me. What's the point of school? I had my own experiences growing up in public schools, going through the public school system, certainly as a first generation immigrant. Coming up through the system, going through assimilation process, and try to normalize to the system, and just trying to become good at school, and could get good at school. It was the path was laid for how to do that, and just kind of continuing onward. And it was this kind of, I don't know, I guess, soulless pathway that I was on, that I just kept going on and educating more. Let's get the next degree. Let's go on to the next degree. And then I took a huge detour. I joined the Peace Corps. I spent 2 years in the bush, in the rural areas of East Africa, in Kenya. And, everything. And I taught, and I was teaching. I was teaching in a school where students were sharing 3-legged chairs, sharing 3-legged desks, where pieces of chalk that I was writing on this painted board were little nubs that I would press into my fingers so that I could get the most out of it that I could. And I was teaching this curriculum. In Kenya, they teach the secondary, this Kenyan, the standard curriculum that's based upon the British system. So they go through these years of school, and then they take a month-long set of exams at the end of their secondary education that determines their pathway and in life. And so these kids I was teaching in this rural school were pretty much stuck because they didn't have any of the resources that they needed. Again, sharing everything and not having much in order to try to beat the system, beat this exam, and they were just completely set up for failure. And that was the history of the school up to the point that I was there. Extremely fortunate. I'm not taking credit for this. I'll take happenstance credit. But we had our first student in that school actually pass the exams and move on to university while I was there. Whatever small role I played, I embraced, but I certainly do not take credit. And it was a huge moment, and it set things forth, and it really kind of, for me, demonstrated kind of what possibilities might look like if we kind of open ourselves up. And it was really the relationship that I had with this student. It's the most amazing thing. Flash forward was when I got a Facebook friend. This was back in the late 90s. So Facebook did not exist yet. So, flash forward a few years later after I'd completed my service, and then to be friended by this student who is now also a teacher is pretty amazing. So it's understanding, what we can do. For me, it's that sense of possibility. How do we create this sense of possibility and enable these ideas, this chutzpah to go after it and do what you're going to do. To me, that is everything in education. Is trying to capitalize. We do this thing where we're all about all the possibilities in the world. When students enter kindergarten, they have this play mindset. They're open in terms of the way they interact with each other, and then we go through this system of narrowing and sorting, and then starting to label and put them through the ringer, and create this narrow profile of who they are. Then turn back around and try to enliven that and boost that up as much as we can for their college candidacy. It's just completely upside down, backwards ass system that we use to send kids into the world. And for me, it's just I've seen kids do the most amazing things. I've had the fortune to be involved in the most ridiculous things, but there were possibilities and just opening the door. I got to have students. I got to go down to Cape Canaveral and sit with my kids in the bleachers watching their experiment go up into the space station. I got to watch my students on stage at the Academy Awards accepting an Oscar with their English teacher. It's
incredible.
It's when you I think it's we have to. I think Di Cervantes said we have to, in order to achieve the impossible, we have to attempt the absurd. And that's for me all of it. It's like go out there and just freaking go for it. Who am I to limit your possibilities? Who am I to narrow your possibilities? And I've had this really interesting journey of just being in a bunch of different communities. In a bunch of different schools. I got my start in independent schools in a Jewish day school of all places, and became a principal in this modern Orthodox environment. And but everything was the same. It's the same. You have super intelligent kids who have all this possibility and potential within them, and it's just doing what we can to nurture and cultivate that into whatever it is that they want to become.
That was beautiful. I think about what Bettina Love said to us at the ICENE conference in Cary, North Carolina, where she said, "Who cares if you graduate with a 4.7 GPA? If school traumatized you and harmed you, what good was that experience?" And I was looking right at you when she said that, because to me, that is what you're trying to change in schools as well. It doesn't matter what colleges you got into. It doesn't matter what quote unquote perfect SAT score you created if this experience harmed you and killed your confidence as a learner, and all the things you talked about in that beautiful kind of narrative to where you are now are about youth engaging with the world, getting off campus, seeing their work engage and help people. I mean, how do we break those walls down further and get our kids out into the world?
I think again, that's a narrative shift that I've been employing is not breaking down the walls, because it's that extreme and we rebuild them. So for me, it's increasing the permeability of the walls. Right.
Ooh.
So we go out, but they also come in. And that there is, this kind of two-way flow of what we can do. And it's not about us trying to break free from our restrictions and our bonds, but rather how are we engaging in the community around us? That's that community engagement piece. What are we doing really to honor the community in which we are? Are we going to be in this bubble forever, especially in independent schools, or are we going to do some work to engage around us and within? Frankly, that's what I've been working on. It's kind of this notion, this sense of what community means. And actually, I've been doing a lot of work with our local indigenous community, building relationships and forming partnerships around what we can do when we speak our land acknowledgement and we say, we commit to uplifting their stories, culture, and community. What does that mean? What are we actually doing to do
What does that
that?
mean without action? It means nothing.
Yeah, nothing. And so it's been an absolute privilege to explore what that is, and to dive into that and create partnerships and opportunities and initiatives that honor that commitment, that speak to that commitment and what we can do, and understanding it. And again, it's creating possibilities. We are here, we are on this land, we occupy this land. And so what are we really doing to honor a lot of, it's kind of a la mode right now to look at indigenization, decolonization, but like, what are you really doing? Are you connecting with your local indigenous community? Are you seeing what their efforts are, and how are you supporting those efforts? What are you doing to really honor and restore the land on which you sit? And a lot of times, they are so used to having so much taken away from them. And that's what I've seen in my work with them, that when you offer, and reciprocity being a fundamental principle of indigenous perspectives, indigenous knowledge, but they so rarely experience it from others, from other communities, except within their own. And so when I'm constantly asking them, how can we help? What can we provide? We have these needs, we have these resources that are available to you. Going back to that humility, that they're hesitant to accept, and they're hesitant to actually see the possibilities that are there. And it's formed this beautiful relationship. And for me, it's important for our students to see that, right? You can, despite all this trauma and all this horror that has been done through the process of colonization, that reparations can be done. So that's, certainly an allegory for greater society. If there could be forgiveness there, if there can be work that can be done there, then certainly there's plenty to repair with the rest of the planet and people, and the possibility will always be there because they're creating it, and ultimately they're going to take over. So create that energy, create that mindset, that ethos, that we are here to support each other. We're going to work together. We're going to reach across. We're not going to get caught in this battle of isms, and we're actually going to dialogue, and we're actually going to connect with one another as people within community, within this beautiful sense of community that embraces not just people, but our environs, our non-human community, living and non-living. And how do we really see that as our path forward, and how to get them to see that they do have a path forward, that there is hope. And they give me tons of hope.
So closing out the conversation, is there anything kind of that you haven't said when you think about your story, or what you'd want, a school to know about you, or the world to know about you? Or is there like a clarion call to action that you have kind of yet to give? And if not, no worries, but just wanted to give you kind of a non-question space to kind of have a statement that we could put at any point in the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a lot of it comes down to, I like being a disruptor. I like being an agitator. And education is always being disrupted by the one thing or the next. What I am starting to feel, kind of down about is how we're reverting back after the ultimate disruption of the pandemic. Schools, institutions, even the most stuck in their ways, demonstrated an amazing capacity to adapt. And it was so learner centered. What can we do? What do we need to do to shift so that we can ensure that students are trying to learn? And I wish we had that sense of urgency all the time, and accompanying that capacity for unknown, for chaos, for allowing change to take place, for experimentation. I wish we would just embrace that as an ongoing mindset about how we deal with it. And I know institutionally, it's tough. Of course, there are infrastructural parameters around that. However, I think that you can create a culture wherein you are thinking about, there's an organizational premise called evolutionary purpose. Like we have our mission, but our mission is not stuck. I think about that constantly with the Constitution. It's like, well, yes, the Constitution is great, but it was written a long time ago by not the best of people. And so, why are we still beholden to this, especially to the letter of it, when we know what its purpose really was? And so, how are we, so embracing this idea of evolutionary purpose? We can move forward. We can pay homage to our founding fathers, whether it's the country or whether it's the learning institution. And then for me, then it's this sense of school. Schools aren't a building. We saw that very clearly. You don't need a building to have a school. So schools as movements. What are we doing in order to really, and going back to these ideals of how are we progressing society and communities and civilization through learning? And going back to Dewey again, it's just really it's about education,
Totally.
and we can add any adjective, any label that we want to in front of to make it like the best education, the coolest education, the au courant term that we want to throw on there. But the reality is, like, let's not lose sight of the core of it, which is education. And what are we trying to do with education? And I don't care what labels we put on it, as long as it's authentic, it's learner centered, and it is allowing us to alter the trajectory of things and move towards a better future in the hands of the ones who are going to take us there.
A huge mahalo for listening. Please amplify the work of Phu and others that we have on this podcast by sharing it out, by following, by listening. There are these beautiful threads of conversation around learner agency and what innovation looks like in schools. Share this out with your community via the platforms that you live and breathe on, or via email, the old school way. Thanks for being here. Have a great day.